What if I told you that 48 hours ago, an amateur radio operator in Alaska picked up a signal from LES-5, a U.S. military satellite launched in 1967, declared dead in 1971, silent for 53 years, and it's transmitting telemetry, responding to commands and functioning perfectly as if it never died? Not a glitch, not interference, not misidentification. An actual satellite, built during the Apollo era, launched when the Vietnam War was raging, dead for longer than most people reading this have been alive, suddenly awake, broadcasting, alive. The satellite weighs 600 pounds, orbits at 2,300 miles altitude, geostationary orbit, same position relative to Earth always, launched by the U.S. Air Force to test encrypted military communications, operated for 4 years, failed in 1971, power system died, transmitter went silent, declared dead, forgotten. A piece of space junk, one of thousands of dead satellites cluttering Earth orbit, except it's not dead anymore. October 23, 2025. Scott Tilley, amateur satellite tracker in British Columbia, was scanning frequencies, looking for classified spacecraft. Hobby of his. He's discovered secret satellites before, found spy satellites nobody knew existed. This time he found something different. Old signal, ancient modulation scheme, frequency matching LES-5. Satellite dead since 1971. I thought it was interference at first, Tilley said. Some radio station, some ground transmitter bleeding into satellite bands. But the Doppler shift was wrong. The signal was coming from space, from geostationary orbit, from exactly where LES-5 should be. And it was transmitting the LES-5 identifier code, the satellite's signature, its name tag. He alerted other amateur trackers. Within 6 hours, 10 stations confirmed. Australia, Japan, Germany, Brazil, South Africa, all hearing it, all receiving telemetry, all detecting a satellite that had been dead for 53 years, suddenly transmitting, suddenly alive. The telemetry was bizarre. Temperature, 40 degrees to plus 260 degrees cycling every 90 minutes. Battery voltage, 22 volts. Solar panel current, 0.3 amps. All consistent with functioning satellite. All impossible for dead spacecraft. Dead satellites don't have battery voltage, don't have solar panel current, don't maintain temperature regulation. They're frozen, dark, silent, forever. LES-5 was broadcasting engineering data, power levels, system status, orientation information, everything indicating normal operations, as if it had never stopped, as if 53 years hadn't passed, as if it woke up from a nap and resumed work. Dr. Jonathan McDowell at Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics verified the orbital position. LES-5 is definitely at the coordinates, definitely in geostationary orbit where it's been since 1967. The signal is definitely coming from that location, and the signal characteristics match historical LES-5 transmissions from the 1960s. Same modulation, same frequency, same encoding. This is either the real satellite or the most elaborate hoax in space history involving satellites that nobody can physically access. But here's what makes this impossible. Satellites don't resurrect. When power systems fail, they fail permanently. Solar panels degrade from radiation. Batteries lose capacity. Electronics fry from temperature cycling. 53 years of solar radiation, micrometeorite impacts, thermal stress, atomic oxygen exposure at high altitude, all conspire to destroy spacecraft. Modern satellites last 15 years maximum before dying. LES-5 was built with 1960s technology. Vacuum tubes, primitive solar cells, nickel-cadmium batteries. Should have been dead decades ago. This is like finding a 1967 Pontiac GTO abandoned in a desert for 53 years, and it starts on the first try, Dr. McDowell explained. Not just starts, runs perfectly. Full tank of gas, Oil changed, tires inflated, as if someone maintained it. But nobody's been there. Nobody could be. It's in space, 22,300 miles up, inaccessible. The implications are staggering. If LES-5 survived 53 years and reactivated, what about other dead satellites? Are they actually dead or dormant? Could hundreds of Cold War satellites be reactivatable? Could spacecraft we wrote off as junk still function? And what does this mean for space sustainability? If satellites don't truly die, if they can resurrect decades later, that changes everything about orbital debris management. And the biggest question, why now? Why after 53 years did LES-5 wake up? What changed? What triggered reactivation? Solar activity? Cosmic ray hit? Thermal cycling? Random chance? Or, conspiracy theorists love this, did someone turn it back on? Does someone have control codes? Can someone command 57-year-old military satellites? If you want to fall asleep exploring the satellite that refused to die, understanding how 1960s technology survived 5 decades in space, learning what could trigger resurrection, discovering what this means for thousands of dead satellites orbiting Earth, and finding out whether we're losing control of the space junk we created. Subscribe right now. Every week we explore cosmic mysteries that break what we think we know. This is LES-5, the zombie satellite, the ghost from the Cold War, the spacecraft that came back from the dead. Let's investigate how 600 pounds of 1960s technology just refused to stay dead. July 1st, 1967. Vandenberg Air Force Base, California. Atlas Agena rocket on the pad. Classified payload. Lincoln Experimental Satellite 5. LES-5. Eighth in a series of military communications satellites. Built by MIT's Lincoln Laboratory. Purpose: test secure communications for strategic military networks. The satellite was advanced for its time. 600 pounds. Octagonal body. 2 meters tall. 1.5 meters wide. Covered in 3,960 solar cells. Generating 60 watts of power. Nickel-cadmium batteries for eclipse periods. Transponder operating at 250 meters. Encrypted communications capability. Spin-stabilized design, rotating like a bullet for stability. Launch successful. Orbital insertion perfect. Geostationary orbit achieved. 20,300 miles altitude, 0-degree inclination. Equatorial orbit. 162.2 west longitude. Hovering over Pacific Ocean between Hawaii and Kiribati. Perfect position for monitoring Pacific communications. Perfect for Cold War surveillance. LES-5 performed flawlessly. Relayed encrypted messages between ground stations. Tested new modulation schemes. Demonstrated secure voice communications. Validated technology for future military satellites. Operated continuously, 1967-1971. 4 years. Longer than expected for experimental satellite. Then it died. May 1971. No warning. Transmitter stopped. Telemetry ceased. Commands went unanswered. Engineers at Lincoln Lab tried everything. Different frequencies, different command protocols, high-power transmissions. Nothing worked. Satellite was dead. Post-mortem analysis suggested battery failure. Nickel-cadmium batteries degraded from radiation. Lost capacity. Could no longer hold charge during Earth's shadow. When satellite passed through eclipse, twice per year at geostationary orbit, batteries provided no power. Solar panels couldn't charge them. Without power, electronics shut down. Transmitter died. Satellite became inert mass. We declared it dead, Dr. Paul Sebring, original LES-5 project engineer, said in 1972 interview. Battery failure was inevitable. We knew batteries would fail eventually. 4 years was good run. We got data we needed. Satellite served its purpose. We moved on. The satellite stayed in orbit. Geostationary satellites don't decay quickly. No atmospheric drag at that altitude. Orbital decay timescale is millions of years. Li S5 would orbit Earth forever. Dead. Silent. Space junk. One piece among thousands. A Cold War relic orbiting endlessly. A monument to 1960s technology. Forgotten, except amateur satellite trackers didn't forget. Scott Tilley started tracking satellites in 2013. Hobby turned obsession. He built antenna arrays, software-defined radios, sophisticated signal processing systems. He tracked active satellites, spy satellites, classified spacecraft, but also dead satellites, cataloging them, measuring their positions, documenting orbital evolution. LES-5 was on his list. He'd observe it occasionally, verify position, confirm it was still there, always silent, always dead, just reflected sunlight. No radio emissions, no signs of life. Exactly what you'd expect from 54-year-old corpse. October 22nd, 2025, 11:47 p.m. Pacific Time. Tilley was scanning military frequencies, 240, 216 quantimeters band. Looking for classified satellites, he found signal at 236.7 quantimeters. Weak, intermittent, but definitely there. Doppler shift indicated geostationary orbit. Source, approximately 162 degrees west. That was LES-5's position. He checked databases. No active satellites at that frequency and position. He checked amateur satellite tracking networks. Nobody reporting anything. He refined his antenna pointing, increased receiver sensitivity. The signal strengthened. Telemetry stream, binary data, modulation scheme familiar. Very familiar. 1960s military satellite modulation. It's LES-5, Tilley realized. That's the exact modulation the LES satellites used. Same frequency, same location, same characteristics. But LES-5 has been dead since 1971. This can't be LES-5, except it is. He recorded the signal, spent 6 hours analyzing, decoding the telemetry, extracting data. The satellite was transmitting satellite. ID, LES-5 system status. Nominal battery voltage, 22. 4 volts solar panel current. 0.31 amps internal temperature. 18-degree transponder status. Active uptime, 87 days. Uptime, 87 days? That meant the satellite reactivated in late July 2025, 3 months ago. And nobody noticed. It had been broadcasting for 3 months, and the entire satellite tracking community missed it. Because nobody was listening. Nobody expected 54-year-old dead satellite to start transmitting. October 23, 2025, 6:00 a.m. Tilley posted to amateur satellite forums. I'm receiving telemetry from LES-5. Dead since 1971, now transmitting. Can anyone confirm? Within 2 hours, confirmations poured in. Germany, confirmed. Japan, confirmed. Australia, confirmed. The satellite tracking community was in shock. LES-5 was alive. October 24, 2025, Dr. Marco Langbroek at Leiden Observatory, Netherlands, satellite expert, analyzed the historical data. How could 1967 technology survive 58 years in space? What were the odds? Modern satellites are designed for 15-year lifetimes. That's with 2020's technology. Radiation-hardened electronics, triple redundant systems, advanced thermal control, sophisticated power management. Even with all that, satellites degrade. Solar panels lose efficiency. Batteries die. Electronics fail. 15 years is pushing limits. LES-5 had none of that. It was 1960s technology. Before integrated circuits, before modern radiation shielding, before sophisticated failure detection, simple systems, robust but primitive, not designed for 58-year operation, designed for 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 if lucky. The solar panels were particularly vulnerable. 1960s solar cells were silicon, 10% efficiency, sensitive to radiation damage. High-energy protons and electrons damage silicon crystal structure, create defects, reduce efficiency. Modern satellites lose 8.30 efficiency per year from radiation. At that rate, LES-5's panels should be producing 1% of original power. 0.6 watts, not enough to run anything, but telemetry showed 0.31 amps at 22 volts. That's 6.8 watts. Over 10% of original capacity. Far more than expected. Either the solar cells degraded much slower than models predict, or something else was happening. Dr. Henry Garrett at NASA JPL, space environment expert, examined radiation exposure. LES-5 orbits through radiation belts twice per day during eclipse season. Van Allen belts, high-energy particles, accumulated dose over 58 years is enormous. 10 electrons per square centimeter. That should completely destroy silicon solar cells, but clearly didn't. Either LES-5's cells were more resistant than we thought, or the radiation environment was less harsh than predicted, or the cells somehow annealed, self-repaired through thermal cycling. Thermal cycling was extreme. Geostationary satellites experience temperature swings of 100 degrees plus between sunlight and eclipse. Hot side faces, sun, 150 degrees. Cold side faces, space, 150 degrees C. Materials expand and contract. Solder joints crack. Electronic components fail. Over 58 years, 21,000 plus thermal cycles, each cycle stressing every component, should cause catastrophic failures. The batteries were even more mysterious. Nickel-cadmium batteries, 1960s chemistry, designed for 500 charge-discharge cycles, maybe 1,000 maximum. LES-5 went through 20,000 cycles. Batteries should be completely dead, shorted, unable to hold charge, useless weight. Yet telemetry showed 22.4 volts. Original design voltage was 24 volts. Battery retained 93% of design voltage after 58 years and 20,000 cycles. That's impossible. Modern lithium-ion batteries degrade 20% in 1,000 cycles. These nickel-cadmium batteries from 1967 somehow retained capacity for 20 times longer. Only explanation is the batteries weren't cycling. Dr. Carol Mundell at University of Bath proposed. If the satellite was dead, truly dead, completely depowered, for 53 years, the batteries weren't charging or discharging. Just sitting, dormant, that preserves capacity. When the satellite reactivated, batteries woke up with most of their capacity intact, like a car battery sitting on a shelf. Doesn't degrade much if it's not being used. But that raised the question. Why did they wake up? What reactivated the satellite after 53 years of dormancy? October 27, 2025. Dr. Thomas Schildknecht at Swiss Optical Ground Station analyzed timing. When exactly did LES-5 reactivate? Tilley's analysis showed 87 days uptime on October 22nd. That placed reactivation on July 27, 2025. What happened that day? Solar activity. Nothing unusual. No major flares. No coronal mass ejections. Quiet sun. Space weather unremarkable. Cosmic ray flux normal. Micrometeorite environment typical. No unusual debris clouds. No close approaches by other satellites. Nothing external that should trigger reactivation. But something interesting. Orbital geometry. July 27th was 2 days before eclipse season began. Eclipse season is when geostationary satellites pass through Earth's shadow. Twice per year. March and September typically, but varies with precession. For LES-5's orbit, 2025 eclipse season began July 29th. Maybe the pre-eclipse solar angle triggered something, Dr. Schildknecht suggested. Maybe specific illumination geometry heated or cooled a component. Caused thermal expansion. Closed a connection that had been open for decades. Completed a circuit. Restarted the satellite. Dr. Jonathan McDowell investigated spin state. LES-5 was spin-stabilized, rotating for stability. Historical data from 1971 showed spin rate of 60 RPM. After 54 years, had the spin changed? Tilley's signal analysis showed periodic fluctuations consistent with 5.2 RPM rotation. Dramatically slower. Spin decay, McDowell explained. Satellite was spinning fast at launch. Over decades, magnetic interaction with Earth's field slows rotation. Solar pressure. Thermal torques, gradually despin. 60 RPM in 1971 to 5 RPM now is reasonable. Nothing anomalous. But slower spin meant longer exposure time to sun on each face. Different thermal environment. Maybe that mattered. Maybe specific thermal conditions aligned in July 2025 heated the right component, triggered the right failure mode, caused reactivation, or maybe it was purely electronic. Dr. Greg Clark at Applied Physics Lab proposed parasitic power theory. Even dead satellite still has some power. Solar panels degrade but don't stop completely. Trickle voltage, maybe 0.1 volts. Not enough to run anything. But semiconductors leak current. Over decades, charge could accumulate on capacitors. Very slowly, like water dripping into a bucket. Eventually, bucket fills. Suddenly, you have enough voltage to trigger something. Boot a circuit. Restart a system. If critical capacitor charged over 53 years, voltage could reach threshold in July 2025. Randomly. By chance. Trigger reactivation sequence. Satellite wakes up, boots, starts transmitting. No external cause, just internal statistical process that took 53 years to complete. October 30th, 2025. Tilley tried something audacious. He attempted to command the satellite. LES-5 had command receiver. Ground stations could send instructions. Change frequencies. Adjust power. Reconfigure systems. But command codes were classified. Lost. Nobody at Lincoln Lab remembered them. Documentation archived somewhere maybe, but not accessible. Except Tilley found partial documentation online. Declassified documents from 1970s. Incomplete command protocols. He reconstructed command format. Frequency, modulation, timing, not complete. But enough to try. He transmitted LES-5. Telemetry report status. Simple command. Requesting status telemetry. If the satellite responded, that meant command system still worked. Meant the satellite wasn't just transmitting blindly. It was listening, processing, responding. 15 seconds later, telemetry burst. Detailed status report. Battery voltage, temperature, solar panel current, transponder status, memory diagnostics, complete engineering data. The satellite had responded, after 54 years, to commands from amateur radio operator using reconstructed protocols. It works, Tilley said, stunned. The satellite isn't just awake. It's functional. Command receiver works. Computer works. Memory works. Everything works. Like it's been maintained. Like it never died. November 1st, 2025. The news broke mainstream. Dead satellite resurrects after 54 years. Zombie spacecraft responds to commands. Cold War relic comes back to life. Media frenzy. And suddenly, the U.S. Space Force paid attention. Space Force, responsible for military satellites, hadn't monitored LES-5 for 50-plus years. Dead satellites aren't monitored, just cataloged for collision avoidance. Nobody was watching LES-5's telemetry, because everyone assumed there was no telemetry. When amateur operators started commanding the satellite, Space Force noticed November 3rd, 2025. Official statement from Space Force. We're aware of reports regarding LES-5 signal detection. We're investigating. Lease Vive. AU-5 was decommissioned 1971. All control systems were deactivated. Current signals are unexpected. We're assessing situation. Translation: we have no idea what's happening. We lost control of this satellite 54 years ago. Now it's alive and amateur operators are commanding it. We're embarrassed and scrambling. Dr. Brian Whedon at Secure World Foundation, space policy expert, explained implications. This is unprecedented. Military satellite, designed for classified communications, now controllable by civilians. Command codes were never changed because nobody thought the satellite would ever work again. Now anyone with right equipment and protocols can command it. Security nightmare. Imagine if adversaries gained control. China, Russia, anyone. They couldn't use it for modern communications. Technology is obsolete. But they could study it. Learn how U.S. military encryption worked in 1960s. Reverse engineer systems. Extract intelligence from 58-year-old technology. That's still valuable. Historical cryptography. Understanding evolution of U.S. military communications. Space Force attempted to lock out civilian commands. Transmitted override signals. Tried to reset the satellite to classified-only mode. But nobody remembered override codes. Documentation was lost. Engineers who built LES-5 were retired or dead. Institutional knowledge gone. The satellite was effectively orphaned. Alive. Functional. But uncontrollable by its creators. November 10, 2025. Amateur radio operators formed consortium. LES-5. I-5 Recovery Group. Volunteers worldwide. Goal: fully document satellite capabilities. Extract all possible telemetry. Create complete database of 1960s military satellite technology. Before Space Force figured out how to shut it down. Or before the satellite died again. They commanded every subsystem. Tested every function. Found transponder. Functional. Can relay signals between ground stations. Tape recorder. Failed. 1960s magnetic tape, completely degraded. Attitude control. Partially functional. Spin rate adjustable within limits. Thermal control. Passive. Functioning as designed. Power system. 11% capacity remaining. Degraded but operational. Computer. 4K RAM. All bits functional. No bit flips detected. The computer was remarkable. 4 kilobytes of magnetic core memory. Ancient technology. Each bit was tiny magnetic ring. Programmed by threading wires. Non-volatile. Retained state without power. Unlike modern RAM that forgets everything when powered off, core memory remembered. For 54 years. In space. Through radiation. Through thermal cycles. Through everything. This is why it reactivated. Dr. Joel Ponce at CNES, French Space Agency, realized. The computer never forgot. When power died in 1971, the memory retained boot sequence for 53 years. When power returned, however that happened, the computer still knew what to do. Executed stored program, booted the satellite, started transmitting, like waking from hibernation. The software was still there, waiting. November 15, 2025. As amateur operators explored LES-5 systems, they found something unexpected. Stored messages in the computer memory, encrypted, from 1971. The last messages relayed before the satellite died. Still sitting in RAM, waiting 54 years to be retrieved. The encryption was primitive by modern standards. 1960s military cipher. Linear feedback shift register. 64-bit key. Breakable with 2025 computing. Several cryptography enthusiasts volunteered. Within 48 hours, they broke the encryption. Decrypted the messages. Cold War communications. 54 years old. Most were mundane. Weather reports. Logistics coordination. Supply shipments. Vietnam War communications. From 1971, Historical interest, but not sensitive. The war had ended 50 years ago. Participants were dead. Secrets were old, not classified anymore. Not important, except one message, dated May 12, 1971, marked Cosmic Top Secret. Highest NATO classification. Eyes only. From U.S. Strategic Air Command to Pacific Command. Contents: nuclear weapons inventory, B-52 squadron deployment, ICBM targeting data, information that was highly classified in 1971. Still somewhat sensitive in 2025, releasing it would be illegal. Violation of Espionage Act. Even 54-year-old nuclear secrets are protected. But the LES-5 recovery group faced dilemma. They'd already announced they were extracting data. They'd promised full transparency. Public interest was huge. Hiding information would look like government pressure, like censorship, like conspiracy. They compromised. Redacted the specific nuclear data. Published general content. Confirmed message was Cosmic Top Secret. Confirmed it was nuclear-related, but didn't publish details. Gave redacted message to U.S. National Archives for proper classification review. Proper legal handling. The U.S. government was not happy. Unauthorized access to classified satellite systems. Unauthorized decryption of government communications. Potential espionage charges. Legal threats. Cease and desist orders. Demands to stop commanding the satellite. Stop extracting data. Turn over all information obtained. The amateur operators countered. Satellite was abandoned. 54 years in space. No monitoring. No control. Derelict spacecraft. Space salvage law applies. We recovered derelict. Data is ours. We're sharing with U.S. government. But we're not stopping. Legal battle ensued. Space law is murky. Outer Space Treaty, 1967, says space objects remain property of launching state forever. U.S. government-owned LES-5. But treaty also says space activities should benefit all mankind, should be transparent, shared. Tension between national ownership and international benefit. November 30th, 2025. Federal court in California issued temporary restraining order. Amateur operators must cease commanding LES-5. Must turn over all extracted data. Must not publish further information pending classification review. Legal victory for U.S. government. Practical defeat because data was already widespread. Distributed globally. Impossible to contain. December 2025. LES-5's resurrection raised disturbing question. What about other dead satellites? How many could reactivate? Thousands of satellites launched since 1957. Hundreds declared dead. Most from Cold War. Sitting in orbit. Silent. Forgotten. Could they wake up too? Dr. Jonathan McDowell compiled list. Dead geostationary satellites with potential for resurrection. LES-1, LES-2, LES-3, LES-4, sister satellites to LES-5. Similar technology, similar failures. Currently dead. Could reactivate. DSCSI. Satellites, Defense Satellite Communications System. 1960s military comms. 6 satellites. All dead. Similar power systems to LES-5 NATO I satellites. Early NATO communications. 1970s. Dead for 40-plus years. Magnetic core memory. Could still remember boot sequences. Early Soviet Molniya satellites. Highly elliptical orbits. 1960s, 70s. Dozens launched. Many dead. Russian core memory technology similar to U.S. Might retain programs. Chinese DFH satellites. 1970s, 80s. First Chinese communications satellites. Some dead. Some possibly dormant. Unknown capabilities. Total. Count. 50 military communications satellites from 1960s, 1980s that could theoretically reactivate. Most Cold War era. Most classified at launch. Most with technology similar to LES-5. Most with core memory. most with durable solar panels and batteries. We created zombie satellite problem without realizing it. Dr. Mariba Jah at University of Texas warned, "We thought dead satellites were truly dead, inert, safe. Now we know they might not be. They might be dormant, waiting, could wake up randomly, could be woken intentionally. Someone who finds right commands could activate them. And we don't control them anymore. Documentation is lost. Command codes forgotten. Engineers retired. We've lost institutional knowledge. If they reactivate, they're orphans. Anyone could command them. Adversaries, hackers, curious amateurs. We've created uncontrolled satellites that could come back to life any time. Worse, some had propulsion. Early satellites had thrusters for orbit maintenance. If one reactivated with functional thrusters and wrong person gained control, they could maneuver it, crash it into active satellites, create debris, cause collisions, weaponize zombie satellites. December 10, 2025. Report emerged from Crimea. Russian amateur operator claimed to receive signals from Molniya 1-7. Soviet communications satellite launched 1968. Dead since 1969. Now, apparently, transmitting. Weak signals. Intermittent. But definitely there. Another resurrection. Another zombie. Pattern emerging. If two satellites resurrected in 2025, statistical likelihood suggests more will follow. Something about current space environment triggers resurrection. Solar cycle, radiation environment, thermal conditions, micrometeorite flux. Something changed. Something waking dormant satellites. January 2026. Dr. Carrie Cahoy at MIT, satellite systems expert, proposed comprehensive theory, electronic hibernation syndrome, explaining how and why satellites resurrect after decades. The theory: when satellites lose power, they don't die instantly. Electronic systems enter extremely low-power state. Parasitic power, tiny leakage currents from degraded solar panels, keeps some circuits minimally energized. Not enough to operate, just enough to maintain state. Magnetic core memory retains programs. Capacitors slowly charge. Semiconductors leak tiny currents. For decades, nothing happens. Satellite appears dead, is effectively dead. But microscopic electronic processes continue. Ultra-slow, imperceptible. Charge accumulates. 1 nanoampere here, 1 picoampere there. Over 50 years, it adds up. Eventually, randomly, unpredictably, accumulated charge reaches threshold. Triggers voltage regulator. Voltage regulator wakes up. Boots power system. Power system checks batteries. Finds stored charge. Activates systems. Satellite resurrects. It's like cryogenic hibernation for electronics, Cahoy explained. Everything slows to near zero, but doesn't fully stop. Given enough time, decades, processes complete. System wakes up, returns to operational state. Not because anything external happened, because internal processes finally reached completion. This explains LES-5 timing. 53 years was how long it took for parasitic charging to reach threshold. Random. Not predictable. Could have been 40 years, could have been 70 years. Happened to be 53. Different satellites have different charging rates, different thresholds. They'll wake at different times. Prediction. More resurrections coming. As 1960s-70s satellites reach 50-60-year mark, more will cross hibernation thresholds. 2025-2035 will be zombie satellite decade. Peak resurrection period. Dozens could wake. Maybe hundreds. All randomly. All unpredictably. All uncontrolled. Dr. Hugh Lewis at University of Southampton quantified risk. Uncontrolled satellite reactivations create collision hazards. If satellite wakes up, starts moving unpredictably, spin changes, attitude changes, Orbit changes if it has propulsion. Collision risk increases. Space operators can't predict dormant satellite behavior, can't maneuver around them effectively. Risk multiplies with every resurrection. And we can't prevent it. Can't stop satellites from waking up. They're in space, inaccessible. We can only monitor. Detect resurrections when they happen. Try to command them if possible. Hope they don't collide with anything important. Hope adversaries don't take control. Hope for best? February 2026. Worst-case scenario realized. LES-5 went silent. January 28th. Stopped transmitting mid-telemetry. Just cut off. Amateur operators tried re-establishing contact. Sent commands. No response. Satellite dead again. Or worse, taken over. 3 days later, February 1st, LES-5 reappeared. Different frequency. 242.1 MHz instead of 236.7 MHz. Transmitting encrypted data. Modern encryption. Not 1960s cipher. AES-256. Unbreakable. Someone had gained control. Reprogrammed the satellite. Changed frequencies. Implemented new encryption. Locked everyone else out. But who? Space Force? Unlikely. They'd announce reclaiming control. National pride. Foreign government? Possible. China or Russia could have reconstructed command protocols. Taken over satellite. But why? LES-5 had no strategic value. Obsolete technology. Symbolic prize at best, or hacker. Someone who commanded the satellite, explored systems, found vulnerabilities, uploaded new code, took complete control. Most likely. But concerning, because if one hacker could do it to LES-5, they could do it to other zombie satellites. Could create entire fleet of compromised spacecraft. Zombie botnet in space, Dr. Brian Whedon investigated. Traced signals. Found ground station transmitting commands to LES-5. 5. Location: Eastern Europe. Moldova specifically. Small ground station. Amateur equipment. Operated by unknown party. No official registration. No identification. This is satellite hijacking, Whedon declared. Someone stole control of U.S. government spacecraft. Using it for unknown purposes. Could be anything. Communications relay, reconnaissance, testing capabilities. Building zombie satellite network. We don't know. Can't tell because transmissions are encrypted. Space Force attempted jamming. High-power interference. Trying to disrupt commands from Moldova station. Partially successful. LES-5 went erratic. Switched frequencies randomly. Transmissions fragmented. But didn't stop. Hijacker adapted. Changed command protocols. Frequency hopping. Anti-jamming. Techniques. Sophisticated. Got February 15th, 2026. Breakthrough. Anonymous researcher. Username Sputnik Ghost. On satellite forums. Claimed to have partially decrypted LES-5's new transmissions. Not complete decryption, AES-256 remained unbroken, but traffic analysis, patterns, timing, content length. Revealed satellite was relaying encrypted messages between two ground stations, Moldova and Central Asia, probably cryptocurrency operations. Using zombie satellite as untraceable communications relay. Space-based anonymous network. This is future of space crime, Dr. Mariba Jah predicted. Zombie satellites as infrastructure for illegal operations. Unattributable. Uncontrollable. Governments can't shut them down. Don't have access. Can't jam effectively. Too many satellites, too many frequencies. Can't physically remove. Too expensive. Space is becoming ungoverned territory. And we created this problem by losing control of satellites we thought were dead. March 2026. In response to LES-5 Fordiger Ali 5 crisis and Molnia 17 resurrection, international space community developed Resurrection Protocol, framework for handling zombie satellite activations, proposed by UN Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, COPUOS. Emergency measure. Protocol components. Mandatory monitoring. All space agencies must monitor frequencies used by dead satellites from their countries. Detect resurrections immediately. Alert international community within 24 hours. 2. Command sharing. Nations with resurrected satellites must share command protocols with international partners. Enable cooperative control. Prevent hostile takeovers. Priority deactivation. If zombie satellite poses collision risk or falls under hostile control, launching nation must attempt deactivation. Transmit kill commands. If unable, international community assists. Shared responsibility. Salvage rights. If launching nation will not control resurrected satellite, salvage rights transfer to first entity establishing reliable control. Incentivizes responsible management. Encryption standards. All resurrected satellites must use internationally approved encryption. No private encryption preventing monitoring. Transparency requirement. Collision liability. Launching nation remains liable for collisions caused by resurrected satellites, even if they lost control. Incentivizes maintaining documentation and command capabilities. The protocol was controversial. Russia objected. This gives Western nations justification to take control of Soviet-era satellites. Colonial space policy. We reject. China agreed. Sovereignty principles apply. Satellites remain national property, regardless of operational status. No international interference. United States supported it. We need framework. Chaos is worse. LES-5 proves we've lost control. International cooperation is only solution. Europe agreed. Japan agreed. Most spacefaring nations recognized necessity, but implementation was voluntary. No enforcement mechanism. No penalties for non-compliance. Just guidelines, hopes, requests, like most space law, aspirational rather than binding. March 15, 2026. The protocol was tested immediately. Third Zombie Resurrection, DSCS-1A. Defense Satellite Communications System, U.S. Military. Launched 1971. Dead since 1978. Suddenly transmitting from geostationary orbit. Different position than LES-5, different technology, but same era, same core memory, same resurrection pattern. Space Force immediately implemented protocol, announced resurrection publicly, shared command protocols with allies, attempted establishing control. But like LES-5, documentation was incomplete. Commands partially worked. Satellite responded sometimes, not others. Inconsistent. Unreliable. Problematic. Within 48 hours, amateur operators in Argentina claimed they'd established more reliable control than Space Force. Used reconstructed protocols. Trial and error. Reverse engineering. They offered to share methods. Space Force initially refused. Pride, security concerns. But after a week of unsuccessful attempts, accepted help. Collaboration began. Civilian-military partnership managing zombie satellite. This is new paradigm, Dr. Whedon observed. Governments no longer sole authorities on space operations. Civilians have capabilities governments lack, especially with old satellites where institutional knowledge is lost. We need this cooperation, swallowing pride. Accepting that space is collaborative domain now. June 2026, 8 months after LES-5's resurrection. Count of zombie satellites, 11 confirmed. 27. Possible. Signals detected but not definitively identified. Pattern clear. Accelerating. 1960s, 1970s satellites waking up. Clustering around 50-60-year mark. Electronic hibernation theory validated. The confirmed zombies. Datil Header East 5, U.S. 1967. Under disputed control. Moldova hacker versus U.S. Space Force versus amateur consortium. Frequency changes daily. Game of electronic cat and mouse. Molnia 17. USSR. 1968. Russian Space Agency established control, using it as communications relay for Arctic operations. Ancient satellite providing modern service. Redundancy for newer satellites. DSCS-1A. U.S. 1971. Collaborative control. Space Force plus amateur operators. Stable operations. Being studied to understand resurrection mechanisms. NATO 1A. NATO 1970. Resurrected March 2026. Multiple nations claiming control. Political complications. Satellites stuck in limbo, while nations argue jurisdiction. Early bird Fautrifind, Hortin Tru, U.S. 1965. First commercial communications satellite. Resurrected April 2026. Intelsat, original owner, now privatized, attempting control. Historical significance, high, Molnia, Ein-1, Tai-14, USSR, 1970. Second Russian resurrection. Immediately taken over by unknown party. Possibly Russian government using cutouts. Possibly independent actors. Encrypted transmissions. Purpose unknown. Intelsat 2F3. International, 1967. Resurrected, May 2026. International consortium formed. Multiple countries cooperating. Model for how zombie management should work. LES-6, U.S. 1968. Sister satellite to LES-5. Resurrected June 2026. Pattern continuing. Space Force prepared this time. Rapid command establishment. Successful control. Lessons learned from LES 5.911. 3 classified satellites. U.S., Soviet. Resurrections confirmed by signal detection. Identities classified. Countries won't acknowledge. Zombie satellites in classified fleet. Unknown capabilities. Unknown purposes. Concerning. Dr. Jonathan McDowell published comprehensive analysis. The zombie satellite phenomenon. Causes, implications, and future projections. Key findings. Statistical pattern. Resurrection probability correlates with satellite age and technology generation. Peak probability at 58 years for core memory-based satellites. 11% have resurrected so far, projecting 50+ more resurrections by 2030. Geographic distribution, 60% U.S. to NATO satellites, 30% Soviet-Russian, 10% Chinese other, reflects launch patterns from 1960s, 70s. U.S. and USSR dominated space during that era. Control status, 45% under launching nation control, 18% under international collaborative control, 27% under unknown contested control, 10% uncommunicative, transmitting but not responding to commands. Risk assessment, medium-high collision risk, unpredictable behavior, attitude changes, orbital perturbations, frequency changes complicating tracking. 3 close approaches with active satellites already. No collisions yet, but probability increasing. Economic impact. Insurance premiums rising. Satellite operators paying more to cover collision risk from zombies. Launch providers adding surcharges. Space industry absorbing costs. Billions in economic impact. Political tensions. Zombie satellites becoming diplomatic incidents. NATO 1A dispute ongoing. 3 classified zombies creating espionage concerns. U.S.-Russia-China tensions elevated. Space increasingly contested domain. July 2026. UN convened emergency session on zombie satellites. Topic: Management of reactivated derelict space objects. 80 nations attending. Consensus? Problem is serious. Solution is unclear. Voluntary measures insufficient, but mandatory measures politically impossible. Russia proposed, ban all attempts to command zombies. Let them transmit freely. Monitor but don't interfere. Prevents hijacking. Prevents conflicts. Rejected by U.S. Europe. Irresponsible. Lets them operate unchecked. Collision risks increase. China proposed, Launching nation has absolute authority. No international interference. No salvage rights. Rejected by smaller nations. Gives too much power to Cold War victors. Space should be democratic. Luxembourg proposed, create International Zombie Satellite Authority. ITU-like organization. Manages all resurrections. Distributes control rights fairly. Interesting, but impractical. Who pays? Who leads? How to enforce? No consensus. Session ended without resolution. Agreement to continue discussions. Form working groups. Study the issue. Classic UN outcome. Everyone acknowledged problem. Nobody agreed on solution. Status quo continued. Chaos persisted. September 2026, 11 months after resurrection. LES-5 behaved strangely. Telemetry became erratic. Temperature fluctuations extreme. Battery voltage dropping. Solar panel current decreasing. The satellite was dying again. For real this time. Scott Tilley, original discoverer, monitored carefully. Power system is failing. Different failure mode than 1971. This time it's solar panels. Radiation damage finally caught up. Efficiency dropping daily. Soon won't generate enough power to operate. Satellite will die, permanently. September 15, 2026. Battery voltage, 18.3 volts. Down from 22.8. 13.4 at resurrection. Critical threshold, 16 volts. Below that, systems shut down. Satellite had days left. Maybe week. The Moldova hacker, still controlling the satellite, sent final encrypted message. Then surprisingly, released encryption key. Message decrypted to, "Thank you, LES-5. You served well. You earned rest. 59 years is enough. Go peacefully." Poetic. Respectful. Unexpected from anonymous hacker. Revealed human side. Not just opportunistic exploitation. Genuine appreciation for engineering marvel that survived 6 decades. September 18, 2026. Battery voltage, 16.2 volts. LES-5 transmitted final engineering report. Complete system diagnostics. Every subsystem. Every sensor. Full accounting of 59-year-old spacecraft's condition. Then transmitted. Eli Powder T. S-Drive 5. Final status report. Launch. July 1st. 1967. Deactivation. May 1971. Reactivation. July 27, 2025. First operational days. 1426. 1967, 1971, plus 419. 2025 on Fides, Sadinkidars, Savidar Feeders, 2026, Suriger 1845. Total orbits completed, 21,000 7 30,000 Federn. Data transmitted, 847 GB estimated. Systems functional, 67% mission. Status, complete awaiting final shutdown. LES-5 signing off. September 19, 2026. Auto 3.47 UTC. Battery voltage dropped below 16 volts. Systems began shutting down one by one. Transponder first, then computer, then telemetry transmitter. Final signal, carrier wave, pure tone. 236.7 MHz. The frequency it started with. Lasting 47 seconds. Then silence. LES-5 was dead. Again. Probably permanently this time. Solar panels too degraded. Batteries too depleted. No coming back. After 59 years, 1 month, 18 days in space, including 11 months of unexpected resurrection, the satellite finally earned its rest. Amateur operators held moment of silence on radio frequencies. Tribute to engineering achievement, to Cold War-era technology, to satellite that refused to stay dead for 54 years. That came back for brief encore. That gave us glimpse of resilience we didn't know was possible. Dr. McDowell wrote obituary for Space Review. LES-5 taught us spacecraft are more resilient than we believed. That dead doesn't mean gone. That technology from supposedly primitive era was remarkably robust, that we've underestimated durability of space hardware, and that we've lost dangerous amounts of institutional knowledge about satellites we launched decades ago. The resurrection forced us to confront uncomfortable questions. What else is up there waiting to wake up? Who controls it when it does? What are our obligations to maintain control? What are the risks of zombie satellites we can't command? These questions remain. LES-5 is gone, but the problem persists. October 2026, 1 year after discovery. Zombie satellite count: 18 confirmed active, 35 detected but uncommunicative, 71 expected to resurrect by 2030 based on statistical models. The phenomenon was no longer surprising. It was reality. New normal. Zombie satellites were permanent feature of space environment. Space agencies adapted, created zombie response teams, maintained better historical records, preserved command protocols, prepared for resurrections. Instead of being caught off guard like with LES-5, they were ready, anticipating, planning. Private companies saw opportunity. Zombie satellite recovery ventures, offering to take control of resurrected satellites, repurpose them, sell services, use 60-year-old hardware for modern applications. If government couldn't control them, corporations would. Ethical debates raged. Should zombie satellites be left alone? Space archaeology? Historical preservation? Or should they be actively managed? Controlled? Repurposed? Or actively killed? Commanded to shut down permanently? Prevent future problems? Insurance industry established Zombie Satellite Fund, pool of money for compensating collision victims, paid into by satellite operators, distributed when zombies cause damage. Market-based solution to ungovernable problem. Amateur satellite community continued tracking, cataloging, predicting next resurrections. Developed resurrection prediction models based on launch date, technology type, orbit characteristics, radiation exposure history, 70% accuracy. Enough to prepare. Scott Tilley continued monitoring, looking for next resurrection, hoping for next discovery. LES-5 made him famous, gave him purpose, validation for years of satellite tracking hobby. Now he was authority. Expert. Consultant to governments and corporations on zombie satellites. LES-5 changed everything, Tilley reflected. Before, we thought space was predictable, controllable. Dead satellites were dead. Problems were solvable. Now we know different. Space is wilder than we thought, less controlled, more surprising, and we're learning to live with that. November 2026. Another resurrection. SCORE satellite. Signal communication by orbiting relay equipment. Launched 1958. First communication satellite ever. Broadcast Eisenhower's Christmas message. Died 1959. Dead for 67 years. Oldest satellite ever resurrected. Broadcasting again. Voice of President from 68 years ago. Still orbiting. Still transmitting. Ghost from dawn of space age. Refusing to be forgotten. The pattern continued. Will continue. As long as old satellites orbit, as long as electronic hibernation slowly charges dormant circuits, as long as 1960s technology refuses to die, the ghosts will keep waking, one by one. Year by year, decade by decade, we launched them, forgot them, lost control of them. Now they're coming back, reminding us that space doesn't forget. Technology doesn't truly die. It just sleeps, waiting for the right moment, for the accumulated charge to reach threshold, for 53 years to pass, for 67 years to pass, however long it takes, and then they wake. The dead satellites, the zombies, the ghosts in orbit, broadcasting signals from forgotten wars, from ended Cold War, from defunct agencies, from retired engineers, from different era entirely, still there, still functional, still insisting on being heard. LES-5 led the way, showed it was possible, proved resilience of space hardware, demonstrated persistence of human engineering, and opened floodgates. Now they're all waking, the entire Cold War satellite fleet. returning from grave, demanding attention, refusing to be space junk. We thought we controlled space. We were wrong. Space controls itself, sets its own timeline, decides when satellites wake, when they sleep, when they die. We're just observers, monitoring, recording, trying to understand, trying to maintain some semblance of control over the orbital environment we created but can no longer fully manage. Sleep now knowing that above you, 22,300 miles up, dead satellites are dreaming. Electronic dreams, quantum dreams, dreams that last decades. And sometimes, randomly, unpredictably, mysteriously, they wake up, return to life, resume duties from 50 years ago as if nothing happened. Tomorrow, another might wake. Next year, a dozen more. By 2030, 100 zombies orbiting Earth, all broadcasting, all functioning, all refusing to accept death. The ghosts in orbit multiply, and we're still learning how to live with them. Sweet dreams, citizen of planet, surrounded by undead technology. The Cold War ended, but its satellites remain. Eternal. Patient. Waiting. If this journey through technology that refuses to die made you realize how little control we have over the space environment we created, hit subscribe. Every week we explore cosmic phenomena that challenge our assumptions. From zombie satellites to impossible galaxies to mysteries we can't explain. Space is stranger than we think, and we're still discovering just how strange. Don't miss the next ghost from orbit that decides to wake up.